Welcome back. So now we're up to chapter 15 in the Reconstructed Gospel according to the Hebrews, and so we'll just go ahead and get started. The Pharisees and sages came to Yeshua, saying, "Why do your disciples transgress the traditions of the elders? For they don't wash their hands before they eat bread." And so this exchange that we're about to read, this has often been used to make the claim that Jesus declared everything to be clean to eat. You can eat whatever you want to. You can eat, pork, shellfish, cyanide, whatever you want to eat, and everything makes you clean. Nothing's going to defile the body. You could eat cyanide, it's not going to defile the body. You can eat, fluoride by the spoonful, it's not going to defile the body. It's ridiculous to think that everything in the universe is suddenly declared good for us to eat. But that's essentially the claim that's made using this section here in Matthew 15 and its parallel section and like Mark chapter 7. But you turn to Mark chapter 7 and you notice there that it tells you that they were eating bread. They were not eating meat. They were not eating pork. They were not eating shellfish. They were eating bread. And Yeshua wasn't making a commentary on clean versus unclean food or meat versus vegetable or anything like that. He was making a commentary on how your actions defile you. And so you can't read into things that are not within the context of the verse. And I've pointed that out. And just pointing out the fact that Matthew 7 specifically says that they were eating bread. Or I'm sorry, Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7 says they're specifically eating bread. It caused another YouTube creator to make a series of multiple videos and tag me in it, ranting about me daring to actually read the text where it says they were eating bread. It's kind of ridiculous. But anyway, so I just want to point that out. And once again, this document, this is not a translation of the Greek Matthew. This is a restoration, an attempted reconstruction of what the Gospel according to the Hebrews originally read like. I've had some people object to some of the changes I made in order to get it back to its original state. In the process of reconstructing this, I took several copies of Hebrew, the Hebrew Matthew, compared it to the Greek, also incorporated some of Luke, because Luke seems to come from a Hebrew source. And then, when Mark or one of the other Gospels gives you further details at times, I've incorporated that too. So there's a method to the way I reconstructed this. It wasn't just that I'm, changing it to fit whatever I want it to say. I'm looking at what the historical commentary is on the Gospel according to the Hebrew and attempting to make this Gospel fit that description. So just so we're clear on what this is. So we'll go on. He answered them, "Why do you also transgress the commandments of God because of your traditions? Is it not written in your law from the mouth of God, honor your father and your mother?" So my dog has decided this is a good time to start squeaking his toy. Honor your father and mother, and he who curses his father and mother will surely be put to death. But you say, whoever may say to his father or his mother in financial need, whatever help you might otherwise have gotten from me was already given as a gift devoted to God. Therefore he does not have to honor his father or mother. Okay, squeaker toy's been taken away. You have thus made the commandment of God void through the keeping of your tradition. you hypocrites. Isaiah correctly prophesied of you, saying, these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. So the context of what he is criticizing them for is not keeping his Father's commandments. And it's odd to me how then certain people will come along and grab this chapter and use it as justification for themselves not to keep his Father's commandments. It's like you totally speak about taking stuff out of context. What more can you say about that? Like, you're gonna pick and choose and pull out this verse where the context of it is against breaking his Father's commandments, and use it as justification to break his Father's commandments. Makes little sense to me. Thus says Yahweh, these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. This is really kind of the same idea as Yeshua's words, why do you call me Lord, Lord, or Master, Master, and you don't do the things which I say. It's the same idea. It's this saying that you're following someone, but then you don't obey them. You just do what you want to do. You wouldn't tolerate that from your children. If your children would honor you with their lips, but then they would never obey you, you wouldn't tolerate that. There would be consequences for that. Your kids would be grounded or whatever. But for some reason we think that God is different, and God will tolerate disrespect and disobedience. If you go into the Torah, and if you just get like a Bible program and you do a search, like a keyword search for verses that contain love and commandments, you'll have all these verses pop up, not just from the Torah, but all through Scripture, where God says, those who love me and keep my commandments, those who love me and keep my commandments. And there's so many verses that it should become apparent to you that loving God means you keep his commandments. If you don't love him, you don't keep his commandments. So you can't really say that you love God and then don't keep his commandments. It's no different than saying that Yeshua is your Lord, but you don't want him to lord over your marriage, or you don't want him to lord over your dinner plate, or you don't want him to lord over your job, or you don't want him to lord over your the way you speak to your co-workers or whatever. If he's your Lord, then you should follow him. And by following, I mean obey. He summoned the multitude and said to them, hear and understand, that which enters into the mouth doesn't defile the man, rather that which proceeds out of the mouth, this defiles the man. Then the disciples came and said to him, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? And Yeshua said, every plant which my heavenly Father didn't plant will be uprooted. Leave them alone. They are blind guides of the blind. If a blind man leads another blind man, both shall fall into the ditch. In other words, Yeshua doesn't care. He doesn't care that he offended people. But yet, if you say something to offend someone, if you're speaking the words of Yeshua, or you're trying to lead someone to the correct path of following Yeshua, and you say something offensive, people say, "Oh, you're not embodying Yeshua. You're saying offensive things. Jesus would never say that." He did offend people. That's how he got crucified. Like, people don't crucify someone for only saying things that everyone wants to hear. They crucify people who offend them. Peter answered him, "My master, explain the parable to us." So Yeshua said, "Are you still without understanding? Don't you understand that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the belly and then out of the body? But the things which proceed out of the mouth are moved by the heart, and they are what defile the man. For out of the defiled heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, sexual sins, thefts, false testimony, curses, and blasphemies. These are the things which defile the man. But to eat with unwashed hands doesn't defile the man. And this here is the justification that people will use for picking out this passage and this chapter and saying, this is our ticket to be able to eat whatever we want. But tell me, where if you're breaking any of the commandments, and this includes the dietary commandments, where does that sin start? Does it start in the action of you picking up the fork to eat something that God has commanded not to? Or does it start in your mind? Does it start in your heart? Like, of course, we're using the word heart figuratively. It really means your mind, like your thought process. And so if you're choosing to disregard any commandment, it starts in your mind. So by the time you actually put the food in your mouth, you're already defiled because you have chosen to do this thing that you know God doesn't want you to do. It's not the food itself that defiles you. It's your choice to be disobedient to God. So by the time that this unclean meat is between your teeth, you've already made the decision to disregard the Father's commandments. You've already reasoned them away. Out of the defiled heart come evil thoughts. One of the things that's amazing with this is if you guys that have listened for a while, you know my opinions on Paul. And it's amazing how many of these things you could apply to Paul. Out of the defiled heart come evil thoughts. Read some of the things that Paul says about the apostles, how he wished that they would cut their private parts off, about how they were servants of Satan, and I mean just the anger and the vitriol that he just spews out of his mouth, particularly in the later chapters of Galatians and also in 2 Corinthians. I've covered a lot of that stuff over the years. So, his evil thoughts, murders. There's no doubt that Paul murdered, right? We have the story in Acts where he was going from town to town and killing all the Nazarenes that he could find. Adulteries, sexual sins. We don't know, we don't have documentation of specific sexual sins that Paul did. But when we find criticisms of Paul and his followers in places like 2 Peter and James and John, there's this mention of sexual impurity that keeps coming up. So I feel like that they were referring to something that maybe we don't know about that was going on. I see it coming up over and over again. I mentioned it in previous videos. I wish I could think of the name of some of the videos right now so I could point it out. But there's obviously something going on. If it wasn't from Paul himself, it was from his followers. There's something that was happening. We don't know what that was. Thefts, false testimony. There's a scene in the book of Acts where he goes before the Sanhedrin, and he's there because there is an accusation that he brought uncircumcised Gentiles into the inner sanctuary of the temple, and he lies under oath. He's there in court under oath, and he lies and says that he's on trial because he believes in the resurrection. That's a false testimony. curses. He curses anyone who preaches a different gospel than him. James refers to this in his letter. Paul starts off Galatians cursing certain people and blessing others, and James is like, you shouldn't be like this. You can't curse and bless with the same tongue. Can salt water come out of a spring, a fresh spring? It shouldn't be this way. In fact, almost everything in James's letter is a criticism of something from one of Paul's letters. He literally deconstructs and rips Paul's doctrine and his methods apart. And if you don't understand what James is doing, it seems like a very, like he's giving advice to people in general. But if you know who he's talking about, you realize how brutal of a deconstruction this is. I mean, he completely destroys Paul's theology. And he does it in a way that 99.9% of the people read the book of James and have no idea what he's doing. And blasphemies. I mean, Paul himself admits that he blasphemes. Like all of these, as far as we know, can be applied to Paul at some point. But people put Paul up on a pedestal, but Yeshua is telling you here, the man is defiled. He's defiled because of his heart. These things which defile the man, but to eat with unwashed hands doesn't defile a man. Oh wait, I thought he was talking about eating unclean meat. Isn't that what we're told? But no, it's not about the substance that you're eating. It's about just not washing your hands. And it's not saying like don't wash your hands. The first century Jews and even Jews today, like the Orthodox, that they will go through these ritual hand washings. And it's not like something you're doing for health. In fact, they don't usually even, in the ceremonial hand washing, they don't even use soap. They just run water over their hands and say a prayer. And Yeshua is saying, that eating with unwashed hands is not going to defile you, but it's the things in your heart that defile you. So people wouldn't take Yeshua's words here. Like I've never heard a pastor stand up and take Yeshua's words here and use this as justification in telling his congregation never to wash their hands. Because they understand that that's not really the context of what he's saying. In the same way, they should understand that eating unclean meat is not what the context was either. In fact, his apostles, as we said at the beginning, they were eating bread. But even if they were not eating, even if it didn't say they were eating bread, you should know these are first century Judeans in first century Judea. They're devout men who love God. They're not going to be sitting there eating unclean meat. They would not be. In fact, if Yeshua was standing there while they did that, or if he himself was eating it, then he would lose every single follower he had. No one would listen to him if that's what he was advocating for. And then you have Peter in his vision in the book of Acts, where this carpet is brought down and all these various animals, clean and unclean. It said all types of animals were on it. And he said, I've never eaten anything common or unclean. So we know he wasn't eating something unclean here, because he says he's never eaten anything unclean. And the fact that he walked and talked and lived and slept and ate with Yeshua for either 1 year or 3 years, depending on which version of the record that you believe, the fact that he never ate anything clean or unclean should tell you that he never saw Yeshua do it either. He didn't have a casual relationship with Yeshua. He was an intimate follower of his. He went everywhere with him for at least a year. Yeshua went out from there and withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. Behold, a Syrophoenician woman came from those borders and cried, saying, Have mercy on me, Master, you son of David. My daughter is severely possessed by a demon. But he answered her not a word. His disciples came and begged him, saying, Our Master, why do you abandon this woman who is crying after us? But he answered, I wasn't sent to anyone but the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and prostrated herself to the ground before him, pleading, Master, help me. But he answered, It is not lawful to heal the Gentiles, who are like dogs on account of their using various meats and practices, while the table in the kingdom has been given to the sons of Israel. But she said, Yes, my master, that is certainly true, but as your dog, please allow me to eat the crumbs which fall from your table. Yeshua answered her, Woman, great is your faith. It will be done to you, even as is in your heart what you have asked. And her daughter was healed from that hour. This is the version of this interaction that we find in the Clementine literature, coming out of the mouth of Peter. It's got a few different details to it as compared to what is in the received text of Matthew. So this is, according to Peter, the way the interaction went down. And then there's footnotes, so you can read that yourself. Yeshua departed from there, and he went to the region across Galilee to a mountain. And he went up on the mountain and stood there, and great multitudes came to him, having with them the lame, the leprous, maimed, and many others. And they threw themselves down at his feet, and he healed them. And the multitudes wondered when they saw the mute speaking, the injured healed, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and all of them glorified the God of Israel. Yeshua summoned his disciples and said, I have compassion on the multitude because they have continued with me now 2 days since they came across and have nothing to eat. I will not let them go away fasting, lest they might faint away. And his disciples asked him, Where could we get so many loaves in a desert place to satisfy so great a multitude? And Yeshua said to them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7 loaves. He commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass, and he took the 7 loaves of bread. He gave thanks and broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were filled, and they took up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces that were left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, in addition to women and children. Then he sent away the multitudes, got into the boat, and came to the borders of Magdala. All right, I spent quite a bit of time on chapter 15, so we'll go ahead and end it here, and we'll pick up again in the next video. Thank you for listening. Shalom.